This is the Stephen Gashler Show, the weekly podcast in which I, Stephen Gashler, the King of America, boldly pursue my quest to usher in a new era of chivalry. I seek out the greatest souls of our time who might be worthy to take honorary seats at my living room table, so that knights can once again rampage the earth, and new tales of silly adventures can be sung for the 21st century. Today we have a very special guest, the lovely...
Okay, so...
Hey, Teresa, I'm in the middle of a recording.
Just a minute, I'm on the phone. Okay,
Sorry, it's my wife.
I've got it. I need to
Hey,
stand behind
what are you doing with that
him
cleaver?
on his skull.
Hey, Teresa, what are you doing?
What?
Stop! Wait, stop! Whoa, give me that!
I was on the phone.
Who are you talking to? Who is this?
Hello, Steve. How did you like my little puppet?
Nephi Ledesma, were you possessing my wife with black magic?
Of course I was.
You're sick, Nephi. You'll never get away with this.
Ha! This is just the beginning. Just you wait.
Teresa, could you just kindly step out of the studio until we're done with the show?
Yeah, I'll go put away the meat cleaver.
You do that.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Sheesh. All you do is set yourself up as an indisputable monarch, and the next thing you know, people are trying to kill you. And now, the fanfare. Tanglwyst de Holloway, aka Tonya Adolfson, is a true Jacqueline of all trades. She started professionally costuming in 1988 and has taught classes all over the US and Canada on costuming, historical manuscripts, and dance. About 2 decades ago, she came up with a fantasy romance and decided to look at self-publishing. The market was very different, and she fell prey to a predator in the industry. After that, she wanted to help other writers not get hurt. Since then, she has written 6 books, with her next one launching in June. Her fantasy series, The Souls of the Saintlands, is the best-selling series put out by FJ Publishing. Her nonfiction how-to costume book, Surviving Your Own Creativity, helps people make costumes they can afford to wear. And she even has a cookbook. Well, that is quite an introduction if I've ever heard one. You sound like you have quite a colorful past behind you.
Or at least a very interesting one, yes.
And speaking of colorful, I met you at the Life, the Universe, and Everything Symposium.
Correct.
At the Marriott Hotel in Provo a week or 2 ago. I was taken aback by your striking blue hair.
I do my best to be unforgettable. 4 weeks ago, for a ball that we were doing called the Gemstone Ball, I decided to dye my hair to go with that dress that you saw me in. That dress represents about 300 hours worth of work.
Woo!
So you can see what that looks like. And it really went with the outfit. And now I'm going to be freaking buried in this color because it's so fabulous. I don't go anywhere that I do not get compliments on having this color hair. And I will tell you now, I never got that kind of compliments when I was just a redhead. So, blue forever. I'm going to be turning 50 at the end of March, and I had never done anything this adventurous with my hair. And I'm like, yeah, you can't get it out of me now. I get stuck in the sunlight just looking at it because it's so pretty.
I love it. Tell me about maybe your latest upcoming book. What's that all about?
Book number 5 in the Souls of the Saintlands series is called Full of Sound and Fury. The series is about a war between heaven and earth in a alternative fantasy world. And this is book 5 out of 9 that will be releasing in June. The original story was called Thine Enemy's Eyes, book 1, and it was about a guy who wanted this woman to kill the king, but he doesn't know about her relationship with the king. So you can imagine how that works out for him. After that, the series continues to follow the adventures and growth of these individuals and their impact on a galactic and eventually intergalactic scale.
Wow, that's epic.
I really, really was impressed with it. And this book, more than any others, had the characters doing things that I'm like going, what? You can't do that. And then they sat my butt down and told me exactly how they could do it, citing references from the previous books to show that this was completely within their realm of possibility.
So you're telling me that your characters talk to you?
No, because crazy people would say something like that. That's schizophrenia.
Well, I read once by Ursula K. Le Guin that when we read, we are all temporarily insane because we're seeing things that aren't there. We're hearing voices that don't exist inside of our head. So it's kind of a wonderful type of insanity, actually. So it doesn't surprise me that that your characters talk back
is.
to you. Does this help you write your manuscripts? Do they give you ideas?
I will tell you this. My job is to sit here and just write this down. And I know this for a fact because once, when I was trying to write book one, and I thought it was going to be a much longer book because I actually made it a much shorter book because I decided not to go into as much detail. And then I had somebody line edit it and say, you could add another 100 pages here and you'd be just fine. And I went, oh, all right. So all of that stuff ended up going into book two. But I tried to inform two of the characters that they were going to do this thing. And they went, that's really not within our character. And I went, well, I'm the author. I get to dictate what you get to do, and you don't get to tell me otherwise. And they went, oh, really? And then they stopped talking to me for 7 years. So I learned my lesson. I apologized profusely. I said, whatever you would like to do. Oh, dear sweet characters, please don't abandon me again. And after that, I just, okay, I just write this stuff down. At one point when I finished book two, the characters got to a certain point and they said, that looks like a good place to stop. Don't you think that's a good place to stop? Yeah, let's just stop there. And I looked at that and it was a total cliffhanger. It was like Empire Strikes Back cliffhanger. And I'm going, if I try to release this, my fans are going to murder me. And they showed me this T-shirt that says, if you kill me, you'll never find out what happens. And they said, you should own this. So yeah, we will recommend that people read the first book. The first book can be standalone. It does not need to go on. But if you buy the second book, you need to buy the third book at the same time. Because when you throw the book across the room at the end of book two, you're going to want book three so you can just pick it up and start.
So you talked about your fans. Tell me about who they are. What demographic is your series written for?
The series is written for adults. So it's not young adult because there is some sex in it. So you get a little bit of tawdriness. So if you're very religious or you are under 13 or your parents are going to read it first, you won't be able to read it afterwards. On the other hand, I was in a medieval historical society for about 30 years, almost 30 years, and a lot of the people in the books are real people. They're based on people that are in the SCA. So it is kind of designed for people who study historical accuracy and clothing and everything else, but they kind of want that little bit of a fantasy aspect to it too. And then I discovered that, no, you can actually just like fantasy romances and that's your demographic. I went, oh, okay, I can do that.
So you know people who are characters in your books. What I want to know is, are you one of those characters in your books?
Oh, I am so arrogant. I'm two of the characters in the book. I am. There is actually a Tanglwyst de Holloway in the book.
Oh, wow.
Because she was the bad guy in the first book.
You go around parading as the bad guy in your books?
When I wrote the story originally, it was just a little filler for our local newsletter up in the group that I was in up in Moscow, Idaho. And it was like, it would only be published like 2 pages at a time, so it took 20 months for it to actually like get all out. And I liked it. I thought it was fun. The people that were local involved in the SCA, their characters were in it, so they enjoyed it too. There was like 2 characters that were completely mythological, i.e. they didn't have a person who was a face behind them. And then there were 2 or 3 characters that were actual historical figures, namely the royal family of France in 1572. And I was doing it just because newsletter involving people's personas, it was going to be fun and everybody would feel like they were involved. Then people wanted to know more, and they wanted to know more about the story, and they wanted to have it fleshed out more, so I fleshed it out more, and that's what led me to doing the self-publishing. Now, this was back in 1998. Prior to that, when it was in the short story, I had my quote-unquote pirate character who was an assassin and a bad person and, preemptive salvage and things like that. And my character, Tanglwyst de Holloway, who is the poor, sweet victim here. And, of course, because the story is called Thine Enemy's Eyes and is based on the premise that your enemy is never a villain in their own eyes, that completely turned on its head. And the hero, the person who's honorable, is the quote-unquote pirate. And the person who was the real villain was Tanglwyst. And of course I couldn't really villainize someone else's character because they're actually playing that persona and stuff like that in the SCA. So I didn't want to villainize anybody else, but I could totally villainize me. I had that right, so I did.
Tell us a little bit about the SCA for people who aren't familiar with it.
we'll give you the elevator speech. The Society for Creative Anachronism is a medieval historical recreation society, not recreation, recreation. They look into the Middle Ages and try to recreate them from 600 to about 1600 as they, quote unquote, should have been. In other words, we do things like shower, love that. We do medieval style feasts, but we also acknowledge proper food handling measures, so making sure that things are completely cooked and pork is completely cooked, etc. We use sewing machines to sew our stuff because there are people who do grow their own flax and sheep in order to get wool, but you also get people like me that do stuff out of broadcloth and denim because it's the right weight. Commonly found back then was cotton as a natural fiber, and I can afford to use it.
People wore denim back in the Middle Ages?
Yeah, cotton is Egyptian. It's always been Egyptian because that's where they were growing cotton. And when the seafaring trade started really, really bringing in large quantities of cotton, the first place that it was used was actually as sails in shipping.
So you're telling me that knights went around in blue jeans?
Not quite, but I will tell you this. If you are a sailor and you are at sea and your pants get ripped, you will take the sailcloth that was pulled down because the sailmaster actually repaired a rip in the sails. And that material, although it may have a rip that would impair sailing, you have probably about the size of a California king bed to make into pants or anything else that you need, a vest, a coat, whatever you need to have. And it's a heavy-duty denim weight material. In fact, it's tent weight. So if you have a canvas tent, that's about the heaviness of sailcloth in the Middle Ages, and it was made out of cotton.
See, I love how knowledgeable you are about these subjects. To me, it indicates that there's going to be a lot of research, there's going to be a lot of solid information and world building in your book series. Do you feel that that's so, that your investment in the SCA really helped you shape your fantasy series?
Completely. I spent 27 years going all over the country and Canada teaching different aspects of what you could learn and use in the SCA. Now, in the SCA, you have practical skills such as how do you pattern, what kind of hairstyles did they have, what kind of makeup did they use, how can I enter this competition, what is documentation, etc. You also have the historical aspect, such as when did the middle class come into being? By the way, that was in the 1200s. In the 1200s, you finally got to the point where the population base of Europe was large enough to be able to handle having somebody do nothing but weave cloth, or nothing but dye cloth, or build ships, or just plan buildings. That was a result of the church finally having enough money to be able to pay someone to abandon all other practices and just grow wool or flax or whatever they wanted to do. And that's when the middle class came to be. So a lot of changes happened in the 1200s. And then in the 1500s, you got another industrialized bump forward where cannons, the simple aspect of having cannons on wheels, changed everything. The ability to cast bronze changed everything. And all of that stuff happened about the 1500s.
That is fascinating. I really want to pick up your books now just to discover more about the world and the knowledge you have about the Middle Ages.
Thank you. Well, in addition to that, there are 7 religions depicted in my books because since it's an alternative world, I had to figure out what the religions are. And the biggest problem I ran into was how do you swear if you have a different religion? It was important.
So a lot of authors are really uneasy about writing religion in fantasy or science fiction. And I love the fact that you have 7 religions in your historical fantasy. So tell me a little bit about that.
The main religion on the continent, for example, is called Augustinianism. It's actually based off of a worship of the saints. Now, I am a recovering Catholic, so I was trained in, the role of the saints and stuff in Catholicism. And I went away from religion decades ago, but I really liked the different aspects of the saints. This person is who you said a little prayer to if you've got a lost item, and this person is who you send a little prayer to if you are experiencing night terrors, et cetera, et cetera. I'm actually named after St. Jude. My middle name is Judine. So I studied what the different patron saints were, and I decided that Augustinianism was going to be the way that I did it, and that's actually named after St. Augustine. So the main religion is the worship of saints. There's no God, but there is heaven, and the heaven is populated with saints. There is a religious war going on, just like there was in history on the European continent in the late 15th